Hi, I want to make a video on the subject of surprise and awe by sheer number. I guess it goes down to the idea of um, a quantitative reaction kind of thing. It goes down to the idea of um, basic using the fact that something is, I guess it comes down to the comparison of qualitative versus quantitative interaction and those comparisons between qualitative or really it does come down to the quality of something, I guess. In many cases, you can come down to sheer numbers, and I guess I'm going to wing it here because I don't really remember what I was mentioning in the notes I have here about the subject, but it's basically surprise and awe by the fact that there's so many of them. And if there's, I guess it goes back to the same point, if there's so many of them, you're not going to be surprised anymore. And how surprising something is really relies on how common it happens, how often it happens. If it's very common, you're not going to be surprised. But in many cases, you can be surprised because, say, you're being surprised because there's so many birds flying in the sky. A whole flock of birds is surprising because there's just so many of them. Or say, the amount of this or that, or the big pile of clothes over there, or something, or whatever it may be. Just the sheer number, sheer size, and obviously, making the distinction between qualitative and quantitative. I guess it comes down to how you decide to describe a circumstance based on the quality of what you find surprising. It can be the quality of the numbers, the quality of colors. I guess it comes down to quality, and quantity is a sub description of quality, I guess, right? In many cases, so it can be quantitatively qualify because there's just so many of one thing, or there's this many of that, or that many of this. So yes, many of us live on this idea of surprise, and we often want to be awed because that awe is what gives us a drive, a motivating mechanism, something to live for, because that's the thing that we're always driving towards, is to feel a little buzz, and feel satisfied from something, and that really, in the end, is obviously just an ah, a little sigh of satisfaction as you go around in your own day to get your own, another little, prick to the right spot so that you can be like, ah, again. You can see the double rainbow or whatever it may be. You can see something spectacular so you can get satisfied again. Whatever it may be. But I mentioned by sheer number, so that obviously must mean something. Yeah, so I guess by sheer number, being surprised by something because there's so many of them. Obviously, there must be a context to this because I must have mentioned this in the context of seeing something to use that as a primary example, but I can't remember right now. So I'm just going to use this, and like I mentioned before, I always mention in another video. Whatever. Yes, so winging it. Yes, yes. Anyway, yes, so yes. Surprise by awe and sheer number. And like I've mentioned before, qualitative, quantitative, I guess quality of something being very in sheer size by a large number can be a qualitative thing because quality, I guess, overrides quantity in many cases because there's numbers and that's the logic of existence, and there's quality, which is the quality of experience, and the quality is an aura that surrounds even the numbers of existence because my quality of my hands moving, there's obviously numbers applied to them. The numbers are not as an 8 is say it exists, but I think the quality is more of a bubble around the numbers. Sort of like the quality of the existence. Now obviously there's a distance. But the distance doesn't mean as much as the fact that it exists in and of itself, and that's the quality of the existence. Not only the size that are included in that, but the numbers, all the figures that exist inside of the math figures, all the different equations of numbers and logic that exist in relationship to all the other things that exist in the bubble. So I think there's more to the qualitative experience, and I guess the qualitative reaction experience leans more on, I guess, quantitative. Fits within that as a category, a subcategory of um, that category. Jeopardy. So yes, surprise and awe by sheer number, a quantitative reaction. So let's see, let's break it down. So surprise and awe by sheer number. So yes, we're surprised, and like I mentioned before, you can experience something so much before it kind of loses its by the amount of times, and I guess making a distinction between the amount of times that something happens You know, a person going skydiving too many times, it gets old after a while. It's no longer, say, as much of an adrenaline rush, say, as your first time. But to have it be such an adrenaline rush and something that you may have liked, had to have probably been scary to begin with. There had to be some kind of effect that was, you know, making you feel, overriding that feeling of excitement that you had, because it's something that you realize. It could have been a surprise. It could have been an adrenaline rush. You're an adrenaline junkie. You wanted to be satisfied by it. There could have been an empty hole that made you find it so satisfying. There's obviously a catch-22, or something that's obviously, you know, makes it seem a little less magical than it actually, a little less, it's a little less magical than you actually think it is in the end. So yes, and over time, the amount of time to do something can belittle the experience, make it seem less, and by sheer numbers, and I guess in the opposite way, you see something a certain amount of times, okay, it goes away, but you see a lot of birds flying in a flock, or a lot of trees, a large forest, the sheer size of something. Obviously, that can have an effect on you in a similar, or say, an opposite way than, say, I'm doing something over and over again. Obviously, I think it's the opposite reaction, because in many ways, it relies on numbers for us to be satisfied, as opposed to, say, the quality of something. Say something else, like the color of something, as opposed to the sheer number of something. If that makes any sense. Obviously, I'm going winging it here, trying to figure out the context of this subject, because I'm not going to sit here for an hour thinking about it. What I was thinking about to begin with. So, yes, I mean, I don't think I need to make this a long video. I mean, I can end this now. I'm just going to reiterate it one more time. I'm going to read over it again to see if anything pops in my head. So, surprise and awe by sheer number, and it's a quantitative reaction, more than anything else. So surprise and awe by sheer number. And we rely on awe, we rely on surprise. We don't always realize something is a surprise, something special until it's a surprise. We can react positively, even though it's a surprise. We didn't know we liked it, and we didn't know we were in a negative state of mind. But relatively speaking, now we're in a positive state of mind. We rely on the awe of something, based on the awe of the surprise that we experience, by the sheer number of that experience, the sheer quantitative experience, the sheer quantitative reaction that we experience based off of a something. And I guess if anything, if I don't get anything out of this directly in context to why I originally wrote it, or the idea came in, I can always say qualitative versus quantitative. I guess in a way, vague concepts kind of idea, because quantitative fits inside qualitative. You know, how you learned in maybe math class or something, how qualitative and quantitative experience are different, or say a philosophy class, or this or that or the other thing. I think quantitative fits inside of qualitative. I think in many cases that's the circumstance, because qualitative encompasses everything, while the numbers encompass everything. Because there's a number, it exists inside the bubble that is everything. There's one universe. Yes, there's one that's quantitative, but it's the qualitative bubble that all those numbers fit inside, regardless of the fact that there's only one bubble of a universe, or whatever it may be, encompassing all. It's still a qualitative that encompasses every single quality of everything, regardless of just number. But color, the number of pixels here and there. I mean, in many cases, you can say the number of things. It can all chop down the numbers. So in many ways, you can look at numbers over quality, or quality over numbers. But one way, you have to look at it, one's more the other, because it's a false comparison. I think one overrides the other, and I think it's qualitative. Quantitative is a little more logical, and it's a little more enclosed. So if you're doing something qualitatively, then it's more vast, and it expresses more of what's actually going on, an actual experience. But also you can say this number happened more and more this way and this way and this way. But I think you're going to describe something more by describing it. And you can describe it with numbers, but I think if you just use numbers to, say, relay a sentence, that's from our point of view, from reality's point of view, you're not going to get as much out of it as, say, maybe just because of our language, say, is describing it qualitatively. Okay, the sun did this, it went this way, it went that way, and then, you know, use numbers, 4 degrees, and you can use those to describe the quality of the experience, but in and of itself, 4, 8, 6, 8, 4, 7, 9, 9, 12 is not going to describe as much as, say, it went this way, 4 degrees, 90, and then you describe the whole situation mathematically, or you try to make a little phantasmagorical story out of it, and may happily ever after, or whatever it is. Describe a fictional story or fantasy story or whatever it is. You get more out of that, but you also deviate more. So qualitative, you're more allowed to deviate, at least using descriptions of describing the reality that we're living in. You deviate more, but you're describing more reality that's happening. So while the phone is ringing, I guess I want to end this video, because I guess there's not much else to mention on the subject. Surprise and awe by sheer number, and that's a quantitative reaction. So yes, I mean, if I didn't get anything out of this, I can always mention in another video. But surprise, I mean, I can just go down to quantitative versus qualitative, and reactionary react to quantitative experiences. I remember this was a vague subject to begin with, but we react to quantitative experiences, um, by sheer number and describing that within the mechanism of, we say, qualitative experience. So we can look inside the qualitative experience and say, yes, quantitatively I can see that means something because there's numbers to it in that number, and I can understand exactly why I'm reacting to it because there's the sheer numbers to it. We can rely on that in many cases to sheer numbers. And sheer numbers, there's many reasons why we see, oh, it's so big, or it's this, there's so many of them, or something along those lines. And we do something so much quantitatively, we get sick of it. In the reverse direction, then and I mean, really, that's what we're doing. So if I have anything else to say, if I miss something, I can always passively mention another video or make another video about it. But I think, if anything, I got something out of this video. Um, so yes, qualitative versus quantitative, if anything. So thank you, and until next time.